Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Making It in Holland. I'm Gulce, rhymes with Dolce, and today we're having yet another one of my favorite sit down, tea next to me kind of chatty videos. And in this one, I'm going to be sharing with you 18 lessons I've learned living in the Netherlands for 18 years. And when I went back and did the math, I also couldn't believe myself. I can't believe I've been living in the Netherlands since 2004. Granted, between 2011 and 2014, I was in the UK for several years for my studies, but most of my life I've been based in the Netherlands. And these days I'm often between the Netherlands and Turkey, where most of my family live. But in this video, I really wanted to challenge myself to sit down and distill the main things that I've learned over the last 18 years. And it's really interesting that this time for me is very representative of childhood, moving into young adulthood, and then eventually finding my own path in this world. And it all sort of coincided with me living in the Netherlands. I've become a lot more introspective the past few months especially, and I wanted to do this video more as a challenge for myself to sort of really make meaning out of my life up until this point. I know this sounds very, very philosophical, but I think that's exactly the point of this video. If you're in that kind of introspective period of your life, or if you've never really reflected on your journey so far, I hope that this video will provide some guidance for you to be able to achieve that very much needed self-reflection. With that out of the way, in this video, I broke everything up into different sections. So we're looking at 18 lessons broken up into 3 different categories. And I have my notes next to me. So these categories are philosophy and lifestyle, relationships, and last but not least, we're going to be also talking about the lessons I learned about money, which I made a video about a couple of years ago about the money lessons I learned from the Dutch. So if you want to check that one out after this video, I'll be linking that down in the description. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So the first lesson I learned is very much this work hard, play hard mentality, and how much I actually disagree with it. I was employed before starting my own business. I worked in 4 different companies in 2 different industries, and there was very much this mentality of people giving their all during the work hours, and then during the weekend they would like go crazy out partying in Amsterdam, getting drunk. And as much as I understood and I respected that, it's never really been my thing. So the biggest lesson I learned here is that it doesn't always have to be work hard, or play harder. You can work okay and play okay as well. I've never really been a big party person until I had a bit of like a more crazy period back at university. So going back to the real world out of university, I realize it's just okay to just be okay and normal when it comes to partying and going out. So don't feel the pressure essentially because everybody around you is doing it. The second one is gezelligheid. And I know there are a couple of videos out there already on the internet, and you might have seen a couple of them already. But this concept of gezelligheid was something I could never fully define until now. I'm almost getting to age 30. I know exactly what it means. And it's not something that you describe with words, but it's more of a feeling that you feel, when you're around friends or when you're in an environment and when you're mainly experiencing something. So I definitely associate gezelligheid with these warm, fuzzy feelings that you get not through material things, but through intentionally immersing yourself in certain experiences that bring that to you. So for me, recently, I hung out with a couple of my friends from back in high school, and I really felt that warm, fuzzy feeling of gezelligheid. And next week, hopefully, there'll be a vlog dropping where we went to Amsterdam, we had dinner, and then we went to an arcade. And it was just all around 100% gezelligheid. And that was one of the main themes that we discussed during that day as well. And everybody had their own definition of it. So I'm really excited to be sharing that with you next week. The third one is this whole concept of doux normal. I'm so glad I learned this, and I'm so glad I know why I don't like it. So doux normal in the Netherlands is this very common saying that allows people to just act normal and fit in the society in a regular way. So, for example, if you're out on the street, more often than not, you see people dressed relatively modestly. And with that, I mean everybody is kind of with jeans, t-shirts, like neutral colors. No one is really sort of standing out. And if you're like on that street wearing like a big, bright pink suit, people might look at you and be like, doux normal. And that's because the society in a way doesn't want you to stand out, because it is a bit more of a Calvinistic society. It's a bit more socialist in that sense, where everybody is sort of seen as equal. And, why stand out when you can fit in, essentially? And the main reason why I really admire that is it works. It very much works for the Netherlands. But the reason why I'm now able to understand it, appreciate it, but also say that it's something, even to this day, I very much disagree with, is that to some extent it kills individual creativity, and it can hinder people from having big, bold, audacious goals, and sort of, in a way, be peer pressured into fitting in rather than being true and authentic to themselves. So I notice with a lot of Dutch colleagues or, friends around me is they have this kind of like ignition inside them. They want to do different things, but in a way they're a little bit afraid of others' judgments. And I think this idea of doing normal, like do normal, very much fuels that in a negative way. So I accepted that this is not going to change, and a lot of people are undoubtedly going to have this way of thinking. But for me, I don't do normal. I'm a bit weird. I've accepted that, and that's just what makes me authentic. And that was also one of the main reasons why I sort of went down a path of unknown, leaving the corporate world in the past and then sort of diving into the world of starting my own business and even starting this YouTube channel, which was super out of my comfort zone. And when I was starting it about 3 years ago, a lot of people told me, like, why would you want to do that? Just do normal. All this to say, essentially just you do you and let everybody do them. And unless you're actually physically harming others, you don't need to do normal. The fourth one is the kermis. This is something we spoke a lot about last week when we met up with friends. But kermis is this kind of fun fair that happens, around springtime, summertime mostly, for kids, and adults go there too, where you have like stalls with candies, popcorn, stroopwafels, and a bunch of rides. Some of them are quite scary, actually, like the ones that spin you all the way around very fast. But why kermis? I feel like the concept of kermis allows you to keep in touch with your inner child. And this is the fourth biggest lesson I've learned, that you should always find an excuse to stay in touch with your inner child. Doesn't matter how old you are and like how far you've come in life. There is that part of you that should always be a little bit curious, a little bit naive and open and playful, which I think what being a child very much represents. So don't let go of that inner child. This brings me to the most crucial lesson, number 5. Collect those zegels at Jumbo, Albertijn, or wherever you shop. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I became one of those crazy zegel ladies. Like a couple of months ago, Albertijn had this thing where you could collect those zegels, which are essentially these stickers that you can collect in a card. And then at the end of collecting, let's say a certain amount, you get like a discount or you get something for free. So I collected those zegels to go to Efteling, which actually ties in really well with my previous point of staying in touch with your inner child. Efteling is located in Tilburg, and it's basically like the Disney equivalent of the Netherlands, where you have a lot of fun rides. And it's very beautiful, also a little bit scary. Some of the characters are very scary and whimsical in their own way. It's a fantasy world. But going back to collecting the zegels, I feel like if you can get a bit of a discount on something you were going to do anyway, and if you can get something for free because you've already spent the money doing the grocery shopping, why not get it? So I feel like this is something that I learned over the last 18 years, and this is not something exactly I would have adapted to had I not lived in the Netherlands. Let me know down in the comments, especially if you are in the Netherlands. Do you collect those zegels at places like Albertine? Let me know. I hope I'm not alone. Let's move on to the last point of this section. Living life despite the weather conditions. Now, I'm going to be straight up with you here. I used to plan my entire life based on cold weather, rain, and snow until I realized that's probably at least half of my life I'm not living if I leave every decision up to the weather, which is going to be forever unpredictable. So I, over the last 18 years of living in the Netherlands, have learned you live your life regardless of what the weather is, because everybody talks about how weather is crap here, but let's talk about how we can actually adapt and live our life to the fullest. And this was a discussion I had not that long ago with my mom, who's back in Turkey, that this is something that she actually learned here as well before she moved back to Turkey. And she's actually applying that in Turkey too, because in Turkey, in Izmir, where it's like constantly sunny, if there's rain, a lot of plans kind of get canceled. And now my mom and my dad living there, despite the rain, despite the sunshine, despite the heat, they still go ahead with their plans. And this is also something that I've embraced a lot more. And given the fact that, tomorrow is not guaranteed, if today is raining or snowing, are you really gonna cancel all your plans because of that? You do you live your life, and you don't let the weather dictate what you're gonna be doing. In the second part, I wanna talk about the 6 lessons I learned from relationships. And the first one is the earlier friends are going to be your friends for life. And honestly, I really wish I knew this a lot sooner when I was actually a lot younger, because I feel like I would have taken those relationships a lot more seriously and build more depth with them. So these days, actually, I'm a lot more closer with my friends back in high school, and maybe back in middle and high school, we weren't as close as we are now. And as we've grown older, we realized we have so much more in common than we thought we did back then. And when you're a kid growing up, sometimes you're a little bit, let's be honest, shitty. Like some people think they're cooler than other people. Some people think they're losers. You have these different groups and cliques, especially at the American school where I studied. It wasn't so obvious like in those American movies, right? Like there's the cool kids and they're the nerds. It wasn't that obvious. It wasn't as divided perhaps, but there was still cliques. And I feel like, why? Now thinking back about it, that literally made no sense. So these days, with a lot of those awesome people that I went to school with, I have so much more in common than I have with any other people I've met basically from university onwards. People that from childhood or from a very early age are gonna be your ride or dies. And this was something that shocked me with Dutch people, because a lot of them back in university used to go back home to hang out with their friends from back in the day. And I used to feel a little bit left out because I felt like they weren't making, let's say, the effort to meet new people. But now I know why they did that, because those connections that you make, the earlier connections, are so precious. And especially as you get older, they're the ones that you default back to, and they're the ones that bring you that gezelligheid feeling. Leading on to the second point of the second part is it's okay to outgrow some relationships. And that's just a fact of life. Some people will be in your life for a period, for a phase. You know, there's a saying like a reason or a season, and then they might leave and you might outgrow them and you might decide to head in a different direction, and that is fully okay. And this really showed up in my life when I especially changed careers from architecture to digital marketing. And then when I switched from digital marketing to running my own business, it felt like a lot of my immediate circle started to change and it became more entrepreneurs around me in the online space. And I don't really speak with a lot of the people that I worked with back in architecture or that I studied architecture with. It was a little bit upsetting, and this doesn't mean like we are never going to speak again, but you grow out of people, life happens, things change, people evolve, and that's 100% perfectly fine. The third one was a big one, and it still is, and that is to separate events from people and relationships. And I think this ties in nicely with the whole concept of Dutch people being direct. I think they're direct because they're very good at separating these two. So if there is a shitty situation that you disagree with, you should be able to openly speak about that. And that shouldn't necessarily impact your relationship with the person that you're talking to such a big bad extent, if you know what I mean. So the moment you're able to separate these two, you're able to also make a lot more objective observations and decisions. And I think this is how Dutch people are so great. For example, at work, like two colleagues outside of work would get along really well, but during work itself, like they could argue and disagree on very polarizing topics. But outside of that discussion, their relationship would still exist and move forward. And I think this is really fascinating, and I really wish a lot more people could learn to master that. Have I mastered it? Maybe not 100%, but life is a journey, so hopefully this is one of those things that I'll get much better at over time. The fourth one comes because the Netherlands is a very diverse country, and that is everybody's going to have their biases, some good, some not so good, and that's okay. And you shouldn't go out of your way to give all your energy to change other people's minds and be at peace with that. The fifth one is to know some of your neighbors, because there's a saying in Turkish, for example, you don't buy a house, but you buy your neighbors. So what that means is a place becomes a lot more homey when you are getting along with your neighbors, or that place could essentially become a living hell if you're not getting along with your neighbors. Again, this doesn't mean you have to be BFFs with your neighbors overnight, but at least know a couple of them and know that if you ever need them in the future for practical things, you can reach out to them. And it's really nice to have that kind of gezellig relationship with your neighbors. I'm very grateful. I get along really well with my neighbor. She is an elderly lady, lives next door. I pretty much grew up with her growing older, and it's just really nice to be able to like say hi to her, have a conversation with her in Dutch, and just to catch up with what she's been going through. And it's just so fantastic because if there's like mail or something going wrong with the house, she is very attentive and she always gets in touch. And I think this is just something very important to keep as part of your relationships. And the last lesson I learned ties in really well with everything I mentioned earlier, but that is to make the effort. Make the effort to meet new people, make the effort to get out of your comfort zone. You will never regret it. All right, the last thing we'll be talking about is the money, honey. So 6 lessons I learned about money living in the Netherlands for 18 years. And the first one is the genuine importance of saving. I know there's inflation, and I know, over the years your cash loses its purchasing power, but it is so important to be mindful and save as much of your money as much as you can so that you have a buffer for when things go right, but also for when things go wrong. Imagine if tomorrow something was to happen, when you have a decent amount of cash saved up, you could act early and turn that into something that works in your favor. And something not so good might happen as well. In that case, you have cash saved up for a rainy day. I know this is not a revolutionary concept and a lot of people talk about it, but it's a lot more evident and like prevalent here in the Dutch culture because they are a lot more frugal than any other nation that I've come across so far. And this leads me into my second point, which is I appreciate being frugal and I can admire frugal people around me, but being too frugal actually learned me the importance of spending more money because I can save back my time. I see time and time again, when you are in a discussion about, let's say, spending money to get new bike tires, for example. Some people might say, like, but why are you going to bring that to a repair person? Like, why don't you buy your own tires from Quantum or Gamma or Praxis or wherever and like just do it yourself? And I see where that comes from that frugal mentality. But for me, I value my time so much more. And if paying that, let's say 50, €100 means I'll be able to exponentially buy back my time, with which I can do other things that add more to my life as an overall, like I will spend the money. So in an ironic way, being surrounded by people who are too frugal made me much more okay with the idea of spending money on things that actually enhance my life. The third lesson I learned, and I made a video about this, which I'll be linking down in the description if you want to check it out later, is that credit cards are actually not evil. I made a video about credit scores and credit cards in the Netherlands, and a lot of people were like, yeah, you shouldn't be spending money you don't have. But it's not about that. It's about having the flexibility to pay for things the way you see fit. Like, not every place accepts debit cards, or not everywhere can you pay with Ideal. Sometimes you genuinely need a credit card. I don't in any shape or form suggest you should get a credit card and spend money on a bunch of things that you don't have with the credit, but credit cards are not evil. So that's my conclusion, because my life changed, especially as someone running a business, the moment I got a credit card and I had a bit more flexibility on some of the purchases and investments I was making for my business. But also as someone who travels quite frequently, sometimes not on every website for every airline can you pay with a debit card. Sometimes you genuinely need the credit card. So big lesson learned, credit cards are not evil, and I'm embracing it. The fourth thing when it comes to money and finances is to spend money on experiences over things. And I'm sure many of you would agree that when you buy a designer bag, it makes you happy for like a week. But when you spend that money that you spend saving the zekels with on an Efteling ticket and go to Efteling and you have a whole bunch of fun, that's the experience you're going to remember for life. The fourth thing is the whole concept of going 50-50. And I still don't really agree with it as much as I understand why it's there, because it levels out the playing field for men and women. Here in many households, there's equal responsibility, and equal responsibility means 50-50 splitting of all the expenses. I don't quite resonate with that still, not because I'm backward thinking, but I think because I still come from that deep-rooted Turkish culture, where sometimes it's okay to pay for things just for bringing joy to other people. Not everything has to be 50-50. And I'm noticing this more and more between me and my friends. Sometimes when we go out, like I pay, and then we say next time you pay, and that's cool. It doesn't have to be 50-50 all the time. Like, we don't need to be counting cents and sending each other tikkies or splitsters like all the time to be so on point when it comes to every single cent. Let me know down in the comments, what do you prefer? Do you prefer going 50-50, or do you sometimes not mind paying for others? And the last ever lesson is, if you are dying with excess money in your bank account, that means you lived life wrong. And I don't mean this to suggest you go blow all your money And it's okay for you to have some savings for the future of your family. Like, I'm all about that. But I recently discovered this thing shared by another YouTuber who actually openly spoke about this concept. And it makes you think about money in a different pair of lenses, because it's a tool to enhance your life. It's not about who has the most and goes to grave with it, which is where we're all ultimately going to end up. So these are the 18 lessons I learned living in the Netherlands for 18 years. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And if you enjoy these chill casual videos, I think you'll enjoy the one that's coming up on your screen right now, where I talk about some of the challenges of living in the Netherlands. And until the next time, as usual, don't forget to stay awesome. Bye bye.